At the end of March 1944, when final plans for the Allied invasion of Europe were being drawn up, about 30% of the total petroleum available to Germany came from the refineries at Ploesti in Romania. American air power operating from North Africa made a daring but costly attack upon the Romanian refineries. 8 months later, this attack was followed up by a systematic campaign of destruction from Italian bases, carried on over a period of 5 months, and reduced production at Ploesti to 7% of its normal capacity. With the loss of Ploesti, the synthetic oil plants in the Ruhr in central Germany and in Hamburg became critical. In May 1944, these were made primary targets. The synthetic oil plant at Leuna was the objective of 22 strategic attacks planned to deny oil to the German armed forces. During the whole period between the first attack on 12 May 1944 and the last attack on 4 April 1945, the average daily production of the plant was only 9 or 10% of normal. However, by planning top priority in manpower and equipment, plants that had been knocked out completely were brought back into production in relatively few weeks, thus necessitating renewed attacks. All during the heavy bombing raids, a rapid rate of recuperation was achieved, and in general, repeated air attacks rather than the severity of any single raid gradually resulted in the almost complete breakdown of German oil production. The military consequences of the oil attacks were immediate. The shortage of available fuel necessitated a severe cut in daily sorties by the Luftwaffe, and gasoline allocations for the army decreased steadily.
The enemy has succeeded in increasing our losses of aviation gasoline up to 90%.
Those were the words of Reichsminister Speer, Tsar of all German production, in a letter to Hitler dated 30 June 1944. Von Rundstedt, too, admitted that lack of fuel was a major factor in the defeat of Nazi armies in the December Ardennes offensive. In effect, the oil campaign proved to be the most immediately catastrophic for all German hopes. The home front sent us more bombers and fighters, and more well-trained pilots, and our fleets grew mightier by the month. But the enemy first-line operational strength, maintained and increased numerically, was thrown into the breach in a desperate effort to stem the air offensive. Our fighters were ordered to seek the enemy instead of waiting for him, and above all, to follow him to his destruction. A gigantic fighter battle raged across the European skies, with victories by our fighters alone of 60, 85, and over 100 enemy aircraft destroyed each day. It was a crucial battle, both sides fighting hard, with air domination itself at stake. This time it was decisive. The Luftwaffe disappeared from the skies, and the day arrived when a huge bomber mission with full fighter escort flew a round trip to Berlin without challenge by a single enemy fighter. Fighters returning from unchallenged escort missions were ordered to seek targets of opportunity. Since the enemy did not come up to fight, down they went to blast his planes and burn them in his airdromes. It was the most savage and devastating fighter attack on record, and the wreckage of Nazi aircraft littered the fields of Europe until the German Air Force was broken forever. Redressed for Invasion Day, the sky looked down on the greatest amphibious operation in the history of modern warfare. After the successful landing on the continent, the Allied Supreme Command decided to use strategic air power against German industrial systems, the loss of which would most rapidly and directly weaken the enemy for the final Allied ground assault. During August, September, and October of 1944, the Allied strategic air forces attacked the majority of motor transport producers in Germany and damaged 9 out of 13 main tank and armored vehicle centers. After the disastrous Ardennes breakthrough and the failure of a German counterattack on the Eastern Front, it was realized that the Nazis would have to bend every effort to increase tank production for use inside Germany. At the beginning of February 1945, attacks on tank plants again were authorized. The plant of Voigtlander Maschinenfabrik AG, VOMAG, located at Plauen in Saxony, was producing about 150 tanks monthly, approximately 25% of the total German production of the Mark IV tank. In March 1945, a series of attacks on VOMAG was begun. 3 attacks that month caused damage to machine tools amounting to 16%. There were heavy losses to stocks of finished motors and main transmission assemblies waiting for mounting into tanks. Another attack on 8 April brought about almost complete disruption of the activities of the VOMAG factory.
After these 4 attacks, 56% of the floor space devoted to tank manufacture was destroyed or heavily damaged. This and other attacks on tank and motor vehicle plants early in 1945 undoubtedly contributed to the disorganization and collapse of the German ground forces by making tank replacements impossible.